Hi, everyone. Good morning. Really happy to be here. And we did the 2-minute rule, so it's time to start. We can't lose any time now. We are all here because we care, and we want to move cleft and craniofacial care forward. And we all also have a diversity story, all of us here, and there's actually much more in common than we sometimes think we have. And I myself was born with a facial difference. I was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate, and I've been working in this field as a healthcare professional, as a pediatric dentist in Belgium and the US, so it's wonderful to see both perspectives. And in January, I was reached out by the task force, by Dr. Stephen Godey and Chelsea Summer, to create a panel about lived experience. But over the years, I've seen a lot of panels about lived experience. And this time, I wanted to do something different. I do like change. So let's take this to the next level and let's really make this about change. Let's really move cleft and craniofacial care forward. Because in so many ways, I've seen so much progress, surgical treatments, but in other areas, there's hardly any progress. And if it's one thing, I hope that will change. It's in those areas that we see really that we're really moving forward. So I was lucky enough to gather an international panel. And it was actually one paper that was shared with a friend of mine who's also part of this panel. It's Gareth Davies. It's a keynote address that was written by Kenny, and I'm so blessed that Kenny is here. He's part of our panel. He lives in New Zealand, so made it all the way through New Zealand, and he actually wasn't planning to be coming to ACPA because of other commitments. But when I reached out to him, it was actually through his institution that supported him to be here. So we should all be very blessed to have him here, and all the other panelists as well. So this is being supported by Smile Train and by Operation Smile as well. So we have both advocates from those big NGOs, where I hope this is a new start for everyone. This is a let's see this as a neutral room where can really talk, where everyone can talk together, when there are no politics, when it's just about working together. And just see this as a true unique experience, to learn from all these leaders in the field. Just sit down, open your heart, open your soul, and let's all do this together. And just let us start with this panel.
So, good morning, everybody. My name is Jackson Doane. I am 19 years old. I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I'm here today both representing Operation Smile and also representing the groups and groups of young advocates who are working all over the world to make a change. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to learn and listen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kathleen Bogart. I am an associate professor of psychology at Oregon State University, and I was born with Moebius syndrome, and I have been involved in conducting research on craniofacial conditions, facial differences, and disability throughout my research career. And I have also been involved as an advisory board member of the Moebius Syndrome Foundation for many years.
Kia ora, hello everybody. My name is Ardouin. I was born with cleft lip and palate. I've worked in clinical and research roles in both the UK and New Zealand, having worked for CLAPA, the Cleft Lip and Palate Association, in the UK, developing their adult services program. Nowadays, I'm a lecturer and PhD candidate at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch, New Zealand, where I lead our Cleft Research Centre, which is dedicated to understanding the lived experience perspective of cleft, with a particular focus on adolescents and young adults. We design, deliver, and evaluate interventions designed to improve self-reported quality of life outcomes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm so happy to be here with each and every one of you. I'm Ballou. I am the Cleft Community Development Manager for Smile Train, and I am also a facial difference advocate working in the community and raising our voices.
I am Dina Zuckerberg, and I was born with a unilateral cleft lip, hearing loss, and no vision in my left eye. And I am the Director of Family Programs at MyFace, where I have been for the last 10 years.
My name is Kariym Joachim. I was born with Treacher-Collins syndrome. Most of my surgeries were done at Sick Kids Hospital, which I ended up working at, and I still am there, with the team that took care of me. I'm also a PhD student and an advocate for facial differences with About Face Canada.
Executive Director of the European Cleft Organisation. Before that, I was the first Executive Director of the Cleft Lip and Palate Association in the UK. I was born with a cleft lip and palate, and before my professional cleft experience, I was involved in human rights and other NGO movements to do with exclusion. So it's nice to see it's all coming together. So thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Phyllida Swift. I am the Chief Exec of Face Equality International. I have an acquired facial difference. I have facial scarring, which I got in a car accident. And I've previously worked at Changing Faces. My background is generally in comms and campaigning, and it's a pleasure to be joining you all from the UK remotely today.
Despite the fact that we're here in the US, this is really an international panel. So see this as a really true treasure, a unique experience. See it as a jewel you have to treasure forever, and make this jewel only more beautiful. So please, we are here to challenge you. You are here to challenge us. And we will talk about partnership, about working together. So the stage is yours.
So good morning, everybody. So a great man once said on cooperation, "Alone we can do little, together we can do so much." That great man was me. No, I'm just kidding. It was actually Helen Keller, who was also a woman. But regardless of who said this, I feel this quote stands entirely true. I chose to speak to you all today about cooperation because it's something that took me a very long time to learn the importance of. As many of you know, people with facial differences from a young age often self-isolate to ease the fear of rejection. And also, as you can imagine, locking yourself in a room alone doesn't create a great platform for it to cooperate with others. But with age, all 19 of my age, I've learned that in order to learn and grow, we must leave our locked rooms and be open to new ideas and opportunities. But all too often, I find that the comfort of shielding ourselves from new ideas and even from new people can be very tempting. When we do this, we create what is called an echo chamber. An echo chamber is a metaphorical setting in which a person or group of people only listen or consider ideas from those around them or those who have the same opinions as them. The only way to defeat an echo chamber is to cooperate. And cooperation from the bottom up means that we start on an individual level. A couple days ago, when I was racking my head thinking about what I was going to talk about for this panel, I had a conversation with someone named Miss Ballou from Smile Train. And as you all know, Operation and Smile Train have a history in which wasn't always cooperative. And when speaking to Iva, I mentioned that, being from different organizations means that we might stand in different places. But Iva said something very insightful to me. And she said, at the end of the day, I'm always Team Cleft. And that really rung true with me, to think that no matter where we are, no matter what country, organization, hospital, care team, no matter, we're always Team Cleft and Craniofacial. And for that, with Iva showing me that, it showed me that in the new dawn of the ACPA, with advocates we have anew, with the organizations we have beginning to cooperate, both in the field and through their research, I think there is a lot of potential for us to work together. And so something else this made me realize is that when we have division, this can prevent care. As you guys can imagine, if we don't share our research, we don't share our resources, our ideas, we don't share the resources that we have physically, that's going to create a division. And in my own experience, I've seen that when doctors don't work together, when patients don't work with doctors, and when patients don't work with other patients, this does nothing to improve the care. And this panel is entirely about moving care for cleft and craniofacial patients forward. And so I think the idea of cooperation rings very true. And one of the best examples of cooperation that I've ever seen has been with young advocates. Something really interesting is that when young people work together, they seem to rid of those boundaries that people of older generations might hold true. As with younger people, we don't have as much of a fence built around us as we haven't had that age to show us that. And so this past summer, I had the privilege of visiting Washington, D.C., to be a part of a really awesome group of advocates from tons of different organizations to advocate for the ELSA bill, the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. And what was really funny is that when we got there was very little talk of who was from Smile Train, who was from Operation Smile, who was from any organization. What it was is who was here to care about others. And so it's funny that one of the few things that I think will start to break down those divisions we put above us are going to be empathy. And who better to represent empathy than a panel of people who've had to not only develop empathy for themselves, but also showcase empathy as a way of life for others. And so cooperation from the bottom up, again, means we're starting on an individual level. That doesn't mean we have to create big promises on the world stage. It means we start person to person. We start with one person in a room with one more person saying, hey, I'm here for you and I want to work with you. And so it starts with small people doing small things in small places to create that big change. And I can tell you, as someone that is a grassroots advocate, there was no better place to create change than in your own community. Because if everybody's in their own community looking to create change, it's a domino effect. It starts with one person educating one person, who educates another, who educates another. And that keeps going. And so, like all of you, just like all of us, are not only advocates, we're also educators. And so we wear a lot of different hats. And so someone else will talk about that, and I don't want to take what they're talking about, but I really like what other people are about to talk about here today because I think it's insightful. And I think this panel is a great example of cooperation because so many people are approaching the idea of partnership, something this panel has chosen to focus on, through so many different lenses. And cooperation, at the end of the day, is a lens. It's a lens in which we can all look at our advocacy, look at the care we're giving others, and think about how that helps other people. With cooperation, we build bridges, not destroy them. With cooperation, we look at others' ideas and consider them. And something people often have misconceptions about with cooperation is that we have to agree with each other. And I definitely don't think that is true. I think some of the best ideas, some of the best care, and some of the best progress in humanity came out of disagreement. Some of the best historical moments, things like the US Constitution, things like the building of the Panama Canal, came from really smart people disagreeing with each other. And so I think it's important to remember, even though we give care to patients, there's room for disagreement, because only in disagreement will the truth prevail. And so that cooperation from the bottom up, from an individual to individual level, is going to be what helps our patients. And when we start person to person, you'll see really quickly that that grows. If it starts with me and Iva, maybe one day that means we have a unity day. If it starts with this whole panel, maybe one day that means we have a whole organization aimed at just getting facial advocates together on the same page. And if we start with a panel just like this with all of you guys, maybe that means one day all the hospitals are going to be working together in tandem, sharing ideas, sharing suggestions, and looking to cooperate. And what's funny too about cooperation is I feel like from a very early age, we're taught to share, right? You have to share your toys, even if you don't like this person. Play nice in the sandbox, stop kicking Jackson during recess. There's so many things people say about cooperation. But as we get older, cooperation seems to be something that gets lost on us. And I think that's because as we get older, we start to become very intelligent. Especially if you're a medical professional, I like to think we're very intelligent. And so when you're someone who's learned so much, you practice so much, and you've done so much to help other people, you start to build up this foundation of the ideas that you hold near and dear to yourself. But something I've learned, begrudgingly, is that sometimes others are right. And sometimes it takes somebody else, who you may not like personally, or someone from an organization that doesn't always work well with yours, to show you that cooperation is really important. and show you that if we want to help other people, if we want to move forward cleft and craniofacial care, it's going to take a village. It's going to take a panel, and it's going to take a lot of people to cooperate. And so I leave you with this. Cooperation is the mecca of ideas. When all of us get together and we look at each other and we validate everyone's experience, we find that the work we're going to do is not only going to improve, but it's going to skyrocket. Too far and too much does craniofacial care not sit in the mainstream of medical health care. But I think we have a really important role to play. And unlike some other medical conditions, when people have cleft or craniofacial conditions, they're taken care of by a team of people. And that team of people isn't just the people who work in the hospital. It's also the nonprofits. It's the advocates, the parents, the community advisors. It's every single one of us. And so when we think of a cleft and craniofacial care team, I want us to think past just the people in our hospital. I want us to think past just the people who directly take care of an individual patient. Because believe it or not, I think we're all a global cleft and craniofacial care team. Because when one person wins, we all wins. And that's the beauty of cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, this is a tough act to follow. Good morning, everyone. I think this is going to be a series of tough acts to follow, maybe myself not included. So, if you were at my keynote yesterday, I'm a research nerd. And so I'm here to talk about the perspective of including people with lived experience as co-researchers and as PIs. So I want to start with the quote, "Nothing about us without us," which is actually a long-standing disability rights slogan that has often been used by other communities more recently. But I like to return to this quote when I think about kind of the way that we developed knowledge about this community. And in the past, knowledge has been developed about us, but not with us. So our field's science will be strengthened and our knowledge will be improved when people with facial differences are included as researchers. And that is because we know that our research will be more valid and generalizable. People with facial differences will assist research teams and lead research teams in answering the right questions and in asking questions in a way that will resonate with the community. They can help disseminate the information to the people that it's really about, the people who really deserve to know that information. So I'm going to talk about two strategies to do this. The first is including lay people with craniofacial differences as co-researchers. And the second is building our own PIs and expert researchers with facial differences. So let's talk about the first one. So this actually goes by many names. Sometimes it's called community-based participatory research. Sometimes it's called participatory action research. Sometimes it's called PPI, public and patient, forgetting what the I is, right? So, but it goes by many names, and many countries are actually requiring in their federal grants that some sort of participatory element is included. This is the case for many PCORI grants in the US, for example, and many UK grants, and I just had personal experience from applying and collaborating with researchers there, and many other countries as well. And the reason that this is burgeoning is that it means that we can ensure that research is not just done in a bench, in a lab, in an ivory tower, but it's actually influenced by and communicated by the people that the research is about. So I want to just share a little bit of insights about a participatory project that I recently engaged in This was funded by a rare disease organization. And so we designed this project to include an advisory board of people with the rare disease. And many of them were professionals in different spaces. Some of them were advocates, but none of them happened to have a research background, and that was great. We wanted some different perspectives on the team, just kind of like Jackson had alluded to. So we included these people from the very beginning. We tried to get individuals with many different life backgrounds and ethnicities and races and genders. And then we started with, what are the main things that we should be studying? How do we ask those questions? What impacts your daily life and your well-being? And we met at least once a quarter and provided updates and tweaked our surveys and our recruitment materials. They played a crucial role in all of this, especially with developing recruitment materials and getting them out to the community. Our board, had deep connections to the community and had trust with them. So it enabled us to get the largest sample on this disorder to date. And now, as we are analyzing our findings, we report them back to our board and get their insights. And it has really shaped kind of the way we're drafting our findings and the way we will communicate and disseminate our work. They will play a crucial role in dissemination back to the community itself, because it'll be coming from them. They have that trust, they have that authenticity, and they will know how to say it in a way that really gets the attention of others. Okay, so the second type of research involvement that I want to talk about, as I said, is growing our own researchers. If you were at my keynote yesterday, you might remember that when I was born with Mobius syndrome and growing up, it really inspired me to go into psychology, to understand my experience and also to help my community understand and get support. However, this can be really challenging to work your way up through a graduate program and into research, especially when you're kind of researching uncharted territory. So it was challenging to find mentors who were interested in going this route. And it was also challenging to find role models of people who looked like me. And that would have gone a long way in giving me the confidence and the assurance that I could do what I was motivated to do. So we need to support our students, our graduate students, and our young investigators so that they know that this is a place where they belong and a place where they can succeed. There are many ways to do this, and ACPA has some wonderful new investigator and young investigator events. I would love to eventually see, as has been alluded to, a meeting or an organization for young investigators with facial differences. As I've mentioned before, I have co-founded an organization called DARN, the Disability Advocacy and Research Network, and I envision this as a place for people interested in psychology to go, but there is, the world of craniofacial conditions and experiences is much broader than just psychology. So we need a broader space to provide mentoring and role models. So all of this requires prioritizing resources to include people with facial differences. So, for example, when we think about Part 1, participatory research, we want to ensure that we are spending the time and the financial resources to ensure that people with facial differences can be included in research design. So this means paying them for their expertise, just like you would pay any other consultant on a grant or a research project. And that's what we do in the project that we're working on now. This also involves maybe a little more time than usual because our team of advisory board members is international, and they have frequent surprising health problems. And so it's often challenging to get us all in the same Zoom room at the same time. But these are things that we think are very worthwhile in figuring out. And then for part two, for growing our own, right, we really need to put those financial resources to supporting young investigators with facial differences. And one example is that ACPA has a scholarship for graduate students, or undergrads, I believe as well, who have facial differences. I received that many years ago when I was a graduate student, and it made a big difference. It was a small amount, but it made me feel appreciated and recognized and validated. And I would love to see more resources put to those issues. So I want to leave you with that, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of my wonderful panelists.
Well, thank you both, Jackson and Kathleen. I want to build on what they've said here. Now, all of us have more than one role. Our roles are slightly different, but we all wear multiple hats. So I want to talk a little bit about that this morning. So I've got this graphic here that I kind of want to talk you through, but experts by training on the left-hand side are the people who are academically and or clinically qualified to work with a certain group or population and have developed skill from their professional experience. So for example, clinicians who work with cleft. On the right-hand side, you've got experts by experience, or people with lived experience, and these are people who have expertise to contribute by having lived with the condition and have it form part of their daily life for a significant period of time. An example of that might be adults who were born with a cleft lip and palate. Now, an expert by experience can also be an expert by training, and that's depicted by the bridge in my picture here. Now, the idea that an expert by experience can also be an expert by training may seem obvious, yet the literature tells us that people usually are viewed as either an expert by training or an expert by experience, but rarely both. So I would like you now to quietly ponder this question for yourself. And I'm going to use myself as the example, not to self-indulge, but rather because I can only talk accurately about my own experiences. Everyone else's experiences are different and unique. But as you can see in this picture here, hopefully, on the left-hand side, on one hand, I'm a fully qualified speech-language therapist, pathologist, with a research specialty in the area of cleft. I did my master's degree looking at SLT in the context of cleft. I've lectured at university into the SLT program for over a decade. And on the other hand, on the right-hand side, in terms of my experts by experience, I have more than 30 years of lived experience of cleft. I know what it's like to be a patient. I know how the surgeries, the orthodontics, the speech-language therapy feels. And I know how it feels when I sit down at a restaurant and people on the table next to me are making comments about the color, size, shape of my nose. Don't say the answer out loud, but be honest with yourself. In your mind, which role am I presenting to you in today? Am I here as an expert by training or an expert by experience? And therefore, the other side of that question is, which of my two sets of experience did you not give me credit for? My qualifications and my career experience, or my experience of living with cleft every single day? Do you view me as much of a colleague as people whose qualifications are solely through being experts by training? The truth is, I can't give this presentation without incorporating experience from both of my roles. Now, I know you're all good people. I don't pose this question to make you feel uncomfortable, bad, or guilty, and don't worry, I'll bring you back by the end of my piece. But more to recognize our human desire to put people into boxes of one or the other, and Kathleen alluded to that yesterday as well. We all have our own implicit associations and unconscious biases. The reality is, that's me up there on the bridge. And it might look like I'm struggling to decide which side I'm on, but rather, I'm actually enjoying easy passage between the two worlds. And if people respect both sides, I'm more than happy to share that bridge. We know that lived experience in Cleft lags behind other areas of diversity. So recent diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have seen greater representation of women, people of color, the LGBTQIA+ community, lower middle-income countries, etc., within the Cleft workforce, which is excellent progress, and I'm sure we would all agree it's fantastic to see. Yet, inequities persist for people with Cleft and visible difference. The literature tells us that people feel when they enter the workforce with lived experience that they feel they must do more than their colleagues to feel accepted and to convince colleagues that they are qualified to be there. Cleft and craniofacial lived experience input has historically been tokenistic or coincidental. So, for example, a researcher presents on their expert by training work, and they also happen to have lived experience. People with lived experience can offer valuable insights acquired through managing a condition across a lifetime's worth of settings. By deliberately including lived experience at events such as these, delegates receive a more honest, genuine, holistic picture of Cleft. So, how can you be a good ally? Well, first of all, recognize existing biases. We all have these, and so identifying that they're there is the first step to being able to mitigate against them. Secondly, create safe spaces. When you go home after this conference, you'll likely take a few days off, do a different activity, recharge, and come back to work. You can compartmentalize. However, people with lived experience can't leave their condition at the door. So talk to colleagues with lived experience often and try to check in with people that they're doing okay. It's all of our job to create safe spaces for people with lived experience. Next, understand that people with lived experience may self-censor to manage conflicting personal insights and professional relationships. Despite striving for authenticity and honesty, sharing personal experiences at a conference of your professional peers or within a workplace carries pressure to curate a distinctly flattering narrative. Though we are at a loss to suggest exactly how to have a tangible remedy for such internal conflicts, perhaps keeping the following in mind is enough. Whilst experts by experience wear multiple hats, they all have to sit on the same head. And then finally, remember that we all make mistakes. The fact that you're trying and that you care is what matters the most. Working in partnership is not without its challenges, but when done well, is incredibly rewarding for everyone involved and benefits patients and professionals alike in ways that we might not even be able to fully comprehend yet. You'll make mistakes, we'll make mistakes, but we're all friendly people who want to work with you. Don't let a fear of doing or saying the wrong thing stop you from engaging with us. Come and share our bridge with us. The view is great from up there. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for this important discussion about partnership. I think it's very fitting that I go after Kenny talking about building bridges. Again, I'm Ballou, and I'm honored to be here with all of you. As someone who has personally experienced the challenges of being born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate, this topic is very meaningful to me. Before I delve into the specifics, I want to share just a little bit about my journey. Growing up with a cleft lip and palate, I have faced numerous surgeries, medical appointments, and societal challenges. We've talked about being bullied, teased, made fun of. I've gone through it all. And through it all, I realized the importance of having a voice in my own healthcare journey. As we build this bridge, this has shaped my perspective on why patient representation is vital in medical conferences. As the world's largest cleft charity, Smile Train is deeply committed to centering the voices of cleft-affected individuals and their families. This commitment is not just a statement, it's ingrained in everything we do, including our education and training initiatives, even down to the role that I serve as the Cleft Community Development Manager now, and I'm proud to serve my community. Patient representation in medical conferences is not just a buzzword, it's a necessity. It's about ensuring that the healthcare system is truly patient-centered, where empathy, collaboration, and shared decision-making is prioritized. When patients are actively involved in these conferences, it leads to better outcomes for everyone involved. As Kathleen said, you can't tell our stories and not have us in the room. For example, I've had the privilege of participating in medical conferences where patients were invited to share their experiences and insight. The discussions were eye-opening to both the healthcare professionals and to the patients alike. It humanized the medical process and fostered a deeper understanding of challenges faced by those with cleft conditions. By actively involving members in the cleft community in medical conferences, we can work together to address cleft-related healthcare challenges more effectively. This collaborative approach ensures that research, policy, and practice initiatives truly meet the stated needs of the cleft community worldwide. So now, how can we move forward? My colleague and now friend, Kenny, mentioned being an ally, but let's take it a step further. I ask each and every one of you to be more than an ally, to be an accomplice. Now more than ever, it's crucial that we advocate for patient representation in medical conferences. I urge each of you to take your action in your respective spheres of influence. Whether you're a healthcare professional, a researcher, policymaker, or advocate, your voice matters in this movement. You can start by advocating for patient panels at medical conferences where individuals with lived experience share their stories. You can advocate for them to be a part of the planning committees, or even as my other colleague Kathleen mentioned yesterday, they can be the keynote speaker. They should have some voice in the planning and of the conference that day. Additionally, support initiatives that prioritize patient-centered care and inclusion in healthcare decision-making processes. We have a voice, we have insight that can help further our community and your research and your work. Listen to us. In closing, let's continue to amplify the voices of patients in medical conferences. Let's strive for a healthcare system where every individual feels heard, valued, and empowered. Thank you for your dedication in this important cause, and let's work together for a brighter, more inclusive future in healthcare, and let's work together. Thank you.
Oh, goodness, this laptop takes forever. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Wow. I'm going to go off script just very briefly and just say that being here on this panel with so many new colleagues and friends has just been such a experience, and I feel so lifted up, and I'm so glad that I got to know all of you and that we get to share our message with everybody. So thank you to everybody here, and thank you to the ACPA for giving us this opportunity to speak. So I'd like to expand a little bit further on what Iva was saying about representation here at these conferences. I specifically want to kind of like add a little bit more on the inclusion of folks with facial differences on planning and steering committees at conferences such as these. As Kathleen mentioned, this is already being done in the research world already, where patient contributions were traditionally very much, hey, you're a volunteer that's providing information to researchers. We're seeing that shift towards patient engagement, where the idea is that patients are partners. We're involved now in the development of research questions, in the governance of studies, and sometimes even performing some of the research itself. And this kind of engagement helps to ensure that the research is relevant not only to surgeons, but to all stakeholders. It's something that allows us to go beyond the outcomes that clinical researchers find to be clinically relevant. And I strongly believe that the same can be said about planning incredibly valuable conferences such as this one. Over much of my life, I've dedicated my time to raise awareness of facial differences and the impacts thereof on people who have them. One way that I did that was through my involvement with About Face, a Canadian facial difference advocacy charity. Over the years, About Face has built many meaningful relationships in Canada and abroad, including Face Equality International. And staff from About Face have come to ACPA before and had booths. One such relationship that we've kind of built over the last couple of years is with the Canadian Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, who last year reached out to About Face and asked for our help in the upcoming joint meeting between the Canadian Academy of Pediatric Dentistry and the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. And boy, was it a really cool meeting. It was in Montreal. I'd never been in Montreal before, and I'm just like, sweet, I get to leave Toronto for a bit. Their specific ask was really two things. One, they wanted a keynote speaker, but the more peculiar ask to me was the request for somebody to sit on the scientific planning committee. Now, I was honored to join, and I did do so. I've been a public speaker for many years of my life. I started doing it as a teenager, and I'd never been on a conference planning committee. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit hesitant. I was just like, well, you know, am I just gonna sit on this panel and they're just gonna want me to rubber stamp whatever they put through? I was hesitant, but you know, let's just give it a go. And I'm not gonna lie, that reservation couldn't have been far further from the truth. I went there, I sat on this committee, and everybody was just like, okay, we want to do a conference that's just themed on craniofacial care, all things craniofacial. And I was just like, oh goodness, is that all we've got? And it was just like, no, we need to kind of like develop this further. And I'm like, okay, so I'm just sitting there, and they're like, okay, we've got a whole bunch of ideas on what we want to talk about. But here's the thing, Kariym. For pediatric dentists in both Canada and the States, many of them are based in a community as opposed to academic teaching hospitals. So when they see people with facial differences come into their clinics, they don't necessarily know what to do at that community level. So what does the facial difference community need? What would you like us to teach other dentists so that when people come into our practices, we're able to respond to their needs? And my mind was just honestly blown, and I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so when we actually kind of like developed it further, I would actually share my experiences. I told them, okay, well, this is how it was like growing up as a child of 2 Caribbean immigrants to Toronto in the 90s. What was that experience like? And they're like, okay, so we need to think about things like cultural competency. We need to think about things like how do we give people the information they need when they need it? And things just kind of snowballed from there. Eventually, we created a conference program that encompasses the experiences of growing up with a facial difference. The idea was, how do we kind of encapsulate the life experience of a facial difference from birth all the way through to when they graduate from our care? What do we do and how do we do it? My slide's gone off. I'll just do it from my head. So yeah, that was really where it was. And eventually we actually got to the point where we were just getting so many great ideas in there. We started talking about genetic counseling, like how can parents and families get that access? We had stories from dentists where they were just like, I had this experience with a patient and I didn't know what to do. And we're like, here's a social worker who has a facial difference who can give you some tips and guidance on how to actually provide really good care for these kids. We talked about transition care. We talked about giving care to adolescents. We covered everything and anything. And I was a little bit nervous after that. I'm just like, how well is this going to be received? I'm very happy to say we had a lot of positive feedback. And I met some wonderful people here, a couple of who are in the audience who actually got me connected with this group so that we can continue to further that advocacy for facial differences in a medical establishment. So I guess to kind of like bring that all together and finish it off, I am a huge proponent for supporting having people with facial differences not just represented, just as Iva said, and even as you just said again, include us in the planning of conferences like this. Because while you all are here to kind of give us the best care possible, while you're here to support us, and these conferences are here to give you the best information possible so that you can provide the best care possible. When you include patient experiences and give us a seat at the table of planning, we can help you to create a stronger message, something that will be more memorable, something that you will always remember, something that you can take home and implement into the care of the folks that come to you. And so please always consider that. Have us at that table when you're planning these conferences. And thank you so much to ACPA for having us.
Good morning. I am so happy to be here, and I am feeling a little intimidated by all these amazing speakers so far. So when I came to MyFace 10 years ago as the director of family programs, I really wanted to make sure that no one went through what I did growing up. I felt alone. I felt I was teased, kids said mean things. I would sit alone in the lunchroom and on the school bus, and I felt anxious with having surgeries, and I felt like I lost my voice. I didn't, because of all of that. And so when I came to MyFace, I wanted to make sure that we had programming to help the ones that we helped find their voice and to be able to, in a way that I did not have when I was a child. So I really believe in the psychosocial piece. I believe they go hand in hand with the medical and the surgical. And so we created programming like support groups and Transforming Lives webinars, which I think some of you have attended, and the podcast, My Face, My Story, and all those services so that people know that they're not alone on their journey, because I really believe that there's power in the shared story, in knowing you're not alone. And I only wish I knew that when I was younger, but I'm really learning that now. And when we hear the stories of individuals with lived experiences, we realize that we're not the only ones that feel a certain way, that there are others that feel the same way that we do. And it's a really powerful thing for me to witness in the work that I do, but I've also experienced it as someone born with a facial difference. I believe that we can do more when we work together. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel when others are doing something really well. And I have seen so many of these organizations doing such incredible work alongside MyFace, and to be able to partner with them, organizations like Face Equality International or Positive Exposure, or to attend and present at the Mobius Syndrome Foundation Conference and other conferences where we get to share our lived experiences. So I really do believe in collaborating, also even just collaborating with individuals within the craniofacial community, and helping them to find their voice, to find their purpose in life. And one example of that is somebody that I've gotten to know, Naomi, who was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate. And she had a dream and desire to do a campaign called Don't Stare, See Me. She is a makeup artist, and she is incredible. And she also started taking photos, and she wanted to do this campaign. And I said, okay, we're going to figure this out. We're going to do it. And she has done 2 photo shoots. She's about to do a 3rd. And what I love is helping people realize their dreams and their, what they want to do. So that has been exciting for me to watch. And when you see somebody, when I first meet somebody and they won't even look me in the eye and they come out of their shells and they look me in the eye and they're just really appreciating who they are now in a way that they may not have been able to do when they were younger. So I also want to say that I think it's really important to partner with the Cleft and Craniofacial care teams so that we can reach more and more individuals and their families so they can take advantage of all the support and resources that My Face has, but all these amazing organizations have. And I hear from individuals all the time that, especially adults, that I only wish I had a My Face when I was younger. It can be any of the organizations you are hearing about today or know of, and you can help us spread the word so we can hear that less and less. I want to also echo what some of my colleagues have said here on the panel, that I want to just say thank you to the ACPA for having this panel today and allowing us with lived experiences to share our stories and share what we feel is important in the work that we do. And what to me is, when I was that child who felt alone and was really having a hard time, there was none of this, really. I mean, there was very little of it, I should say. And seeing in the last, even just in the last 10 years or in the last 5 years, what has happened and how much there's such a community, and I think social media has helped that a lot too, but it's just amazing for me because it makes me so emotional to think that this exists today, because it didn't exist when I was growing up. So thank you.
Okay, I'm amazed by the previous speakers, and there's quite a few things that have sort of made me think and rethink some of the things I'm going to say. But I'll try and stick to my original script, which is largely about collaboration. I'm going to be talking firstly about how I think some perceptions have changed over the past 50 years, of clefts in particular. Secondly, I'm going to be talking more about how there's a much greater degree of collaboration and involvement of health professionals and researchers in the work of support groups that we all represent. And thirdly, I'm just wondering whether there's an onus on us as people with lived experience, as Kariym was saying, to actually reach out to scientists, researchers, health professionals, and just help them understand some of the challenges and together look at the solutions. So first of all, talking about life 50 years ago, stigma was a very big thing. It still is in many parts of the world, and I think we need to put this in a global context too. I think some of the things we may have learned here can actually be useful when looking at other parts of the world. But likewise, there are some things going on in other parts of the world where there is inclusion in hospitals, people with lived experience in India. And I think we can learn from some of those models too. So we don't have all the answers, but I think we, over the past half century, we've actually moved forward a bit. It was difficult growing up with a cleft when no one talked about it. There was having a cleft was not something that you shared. It was something that you hid. there was, I think there was somebody else in my school with a cleft, but we always tried to avoid each other as much as we could because that was the thing to do. And I think things have changed over the years. And I think that's to do with visibility. I've always said, if you want to get rid of prejudice, you have to make visible difference visible. You have to ensure that something becomes familiar. And I think that has happened to a reasonable extent in the first world, with a greater understanding of, there have been role models of people with clefts. Stacey Keach was one, Joachim Phoenix is another now, and there's people in public office, public life. There's still a great way to go, but I think there has been some progress made in actually making sure that the visible difference is more visible. And I think health professionals can also fit into that space and make sure that what they do, what they talk about actually is more in the public domain rather than just kept within the hospital walls, which kind of moves me on to the second area, which is about support groups. There has been a sea change there. I mean, it's great we're at a plenary session here today. I remember going to one of the ACPA conferences many years ago, probably 25 years ago. And they did have a session for people with lived experience for support groups, but it was actually a day after the main conference. And it was really an occasion where we were encouraged to sit around quite large round tables and share experiences about how many surgeries we had, which wasn't particularly helpful for anyone. And it certainly we didn't have the opportunity to engage with the clinicians. And I really take today as being a great opportunity. The door is open. We've got more than a foot in the door, and I think we need to work on that and build further collaboration. Support groups really only work well if we've got everyone involved. I've been involved in several in the cleft world over the past 25 years. I think if you look at a support group as being part, as earlier speakers have said, part of the wider care team, part of the team that actually not just raises money in boxes outside shops on the main street, but actually takes a part in developing protocols of care, having a key role in research, making sure that there are wider aspects, holistic aspects of care talked about within the hospital and beyond the hospital walls. I think the collaboration of the health professionals and those with lived experience is actually happening now more than it ever did. And I think that's a great way forward. And talking about the important role of funders, I've just been involved in a major grant application within the European Union, and it's a pure research project. It's actually about bone grafting. But one of the requirements of the grant is they actually have to have someone in charge of patient engagement, and that person is me. And that wouldn't have happened in the past. So all of a sudden, thanks to a decision made at a high political level within the European Union, they are now obliged to include patients in research priorities. And I think that's huge. So if we knock on the doors of people at the top in government, people who make decisions about grants and say, look, we need to be there, then I think that's a good way of actually creating leverage. And actually this project about bone grafting, some of the things they were saying about clefts was actually unbelievably naive. And I think they were quite surprised that I was going to be a tick box person representing the patient movement. And actually, I ended up being on the project management group, which is exciting. So I think that's really valuable. The last area that I want to talk about is maybe what can we do ourselves? What initiatives can we develop? And Kariym was already talking about being involved in developing materials for researchers, for health professionals, in trying to ensure that they understand. I mean, I've been involved with a number of projects over the years where we've surveyed researchers and health professionals, about their experiences of working with visible difference. And by and large, they all say, we find it challenging because we don't really know what to do or say, and please help us. And so there have been a few projects that we've been trying to develop to engage with health professionals, actually spelling out some of the challenges and working together at solutions. There's a project I'm working on now called Face Equality Training, and we've done a survey as part of that. And again, the results are, yeah, please pave the way for us, help us to understand what we're not seeing, what we're not doing. So I think we do have work to do. I think the door is open. It needs to be open wider. I also will say that if it's not us, in other words, people with lived experience plus the health professionals, then no one else will do it. So I think we have a large responsibility to make this work and make it work as a team. So I'll stop there. So thank you.
Hi there. I'm conscious we're running over time, so I'll try and keep it brief. But this is going to be a little bit different. So we at Face Equality International, we're a social justice charity, and we're the only nonprofit that solely focuses on the model that is not the individual that needs to be fixed, very much quote unquote fixed. It is society. So we're also the only United Nations accredited NGO into the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that represents the global disfigurement community, a term which, by the way, I like to reclaim. So as a growing global alliance of nonprofits, many of which are represented here on this panel, we capacity build for organizations who are serving those direct needs of the facial difference community by collectively building the face equality movement. So collaboration is at our core. And although our current model primarily serves established nonprofits, we're actively trying to source funding right now to try and work more closely with experts such as my fellow panelists here today. So our societal focus, however, does not disregard the very real medical reality of a disfigurement and the need for equitable healthcare across the globe. But what we feel needs to shift is this constant focus and thereby resources on technological advancements, surgical techniques, tools, and the disproportionate funding that goes into these spheres, which will only ever move the goalposts further and further away. This model is focused on enabling a person to cope in a broken world, which inevitably makes a person feel like they are broken. Instead, I urge you to imagine a world where someone is comfortable without surgeries that go beyond function and solely into aesthetics. A world where psychosocial challenges are not deemed to be an inevitability of looking different, and thereby endless surgeries and associated medical trauma are marketed as the only solution. Surgery itself will never be a fix-all, but working with surgeons to fix society is a necessity. The same goes, of course, for all healthcare professionals, who you all know are the next point of contact beyond immediate families, thereby becoming that much needed extended family. So the clinical setting is just one of many settings where we all have a duty to place the power back in the hands of the facial difference community, where it is those with lived experience that decide upon the priorities in their care and beyond. So when you say it like that, it doesn't seem that radical, and yet seemingly it still is. So diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to nurture opportunities for the facial difference community in healthcare and beyond are a cornerstone of achieving face equality. And this is a logical place for delegates here to start. Having visited a hospital last year in India with a mandate for 40% of staff who had lived experience of disfigurement or disability, I know that this is possible, and I've seen firsthand the positive impact that this can have on an individual level, but also on a societal level. So we at FEI are currently piloting a workplace program called Creating Appearance Inclusive Workplaces, and I would encourage you all to reach out to find out more about this. But in the meantime, I would encourage you all to recognize that we all have a duty to make face equality a reality and to bring those goalposts closer. Thank you.
So I got the opportunity to freewheel with this panel, so it's all about change. And this is not just a panel. This is a real call to action. And we're here to challenge you. And afterwards, you're here to challenge us. So ask us difficult questions and really move forward. So, Jackson?
So my call to action is very simple. It's just that kindness is advocacy. If you want to create a change, look at things through the lens of kindness, and I promise you, you'll create a better world for everybody, but especially for people with facial differences. Thank you.
Hi again, everyone. Mine is also simple. Facial differences are an important facet of diversity. And our field is enriched when we are included.
I think my one is also relatively simple. So resolve to view your colleagues with lived experience as people who bring a novel perspective to the team rather than a conflict of interest.
And so, again, let's just unite to ensure that every medical conference includes the voices of patients, forging a future where empathy and collaboration drive transformative healthcare outcomes.
Yeah, and so mine is also fairly simple as well. What better way to build a conference program that meets the needs of both clinical professionals and individuals with facial differences than ensuring that our voices are among conference program leadership?
We are more powerful when we work together to ensure that all individuals with craniofacial differences and their families have access to support and resources so they know they are not alone on their journey.
Okay, a simple question. What would the world look like for people with a visible difference to thrive? Good healthcare is part of that, but there's so much more. And I would urge that everyone in this room, health professionals and people with lived experience, to try and work towards that world where everyone with a facial difference can thrive.
So again, we all have the power to make face equality a reality, but as the first point of contact beyond immediate families, healthcare professionals are fundamental to creating a more accepting and inclusive world.
So I must say, I feel so blessed to be here, to have all these people here. And thank you, Jackson, Kenny, Iva, Kathleen, Dina, Kariym, and more so our internationals who are in Europe, and Phyllida and Gareth, to make this happen and to actually say yes when I reached out to you, and just being able to work together. And what we all feel, exposure is key to change. And just let's take this momentum to really work as a team, because teamwork makes the dream work. And let's make sure that every individual with a facial difference around the globe, this is not just in the West, this is not in Europe, but it's really every individual around the globe can live their dreams. And let's just walk together. Let's build those bridges. Let's really take this momentum to change. So we've challenged you. Now it's time for you to challenge us.
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Pat Chabarro from New York. First, I want to say that I am so pleased to have this panel not be on the side at the afternoon where 3 people come. I think that's what happened last year. We had a very small showing, and I've always said we need this to be in the very first general session. So I would hope if we do this again next year, and I hope we do, that everyone in their evaluation puts this needs to be front and center in the very beginning of the program so that everyone is together. That was my first comment. The second thing, Phyllida, to you, we need help as clinicians. I had a 17-year-old girl who was being pre-opted for a rhinoplasty, and I knew that she just looked so unhappy. And I asked to speak to her separately, and she said, Pat, I don't want to have this surgery. My parents are pushing me to have this surgery. And to your point, and your mission, Phyllida, is for us to not have to change the face for society to feel better. How do we help make this happen? I think parents are struggling because they feel that their goal is to have their children fit in. And I think that this is a really big challenge for us. So we need all of your help to deal with this.
I do believe there are resources that exist about navigating those conversations and the conflict between what a parent wants versus the person. The rest of the panel might know more on that, but I think you're right. Until the parents don't feel the pressure of having a child that fits in, that will forever be a challenge.
Good morning, folks. My name is Ron Strauss. I'm from UNC Chapel Hill. I just want to say I consider this to be a historic moment where people are talking to each other across diagnostic fields and actually asking for a challenge. My own personal experience has been since about 1985. I've worked with people living with HIV and AIDS in research, and I learned some big lessons about community-based participatory research. There is no way you could do HIV community-based research without involving participants who are folks who are affected. It's just so part of the landscape you wouldn't even dream of doing it. So there's a big gap in our research, and I just want to put that out there because I don't believe that that gap can be filled without the orientation that you have been talking about. There hasn't been a comprehensive, large, national or international study of adult experiences since 1953, something like that, when it was done in the state of Iowa. It has never been replicated. There is a need to talk about your educational lives, quality of life, occupation, partnerships, marital life, childbearing, faith, experiences, support group participation. There's a big story that needs to be done. And it's not a story that I think the community of not lived experiences, the bridge, the people that live on one side of the bridge really shouldn't be doing that study without the people who live on both sides of that bridge. And I love the metaphor that you used, and I want to say that's a huge gap in the scholarly portfolio, and I've looked everywhere to try and find those answers. I believe it's fundable, but it ought to be led by some form of a coalition of people who have visible differences. So you asked for a challenge. I think it's a big challenge. I know this is possible.
Thank you, Ron. I really appreciate that comment and those insights. let's collaborate. And I mean that as an invitation to my esteemed colleagues here, and to you, Ron. I know you have some wonderful knowledge in this area. And I want to just amplify something that you noted around the norms around HIV research. You know, you would never have work on HIV without people with lived experience being meaningfully included. And so I want to take the message that I said one step further and put out a very clear call to action. And that is any research that is funded that is about craniofacial conditions should be required to include meaningful and paid engagement for people with facial differences. Again, the payment is crucial because it is symbolic as well as instrumental, because we are experts and we have a lot to contribute. So I would encourage NIH, NIDCR, ACPA to require this in your grants.
And thank you. And just to add to that, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think we absolutely do need that research. It's something that Nicholas Stock and myself worked on in the UK back in 2018, where we sought out the perspectives of adults on all of those things, like their holistic quality of life, so going beyond just how they feel about treatment, but actually what does education, work life, relationships, attitudes towards children look like. And obviously UK is a smaller scale, but we have published that data, and I believe there's strong appetite and work underway to replicate that here. So I would strongly encourage that, because completely agree it's a really important piece of the puzzle.
And just to add it myself, I'm preaching for a while now that we really need to refocus. We really need to focus on the teens, on the adults. People in teenage years, it's for everyone. It are their formative years. Everyone is very vulnerable. But living with a facial difference, it makes it much harder. And some people adapt qualities. I did it myself. It was a part of my journey, my mental health issues, where I was ashamed for over 20 years. And 2 years ago, I started opening up about it, because I could be ashamed and feel sad about it the rest of my life, or I was able to make a change and talk about it. Just to open and expose people about it, because if you don't expose people, nothing will happen. And although my mental health struggles were visible, so many mental health struggles aren't visible at all. And everyone struggles. But if we can really focus also more on those teenage years, we can do so much prevention. So let's actually shift and think about, like, how can we prevent something? This is a field, although I'm trained as a pediatric dentist, we do a lot of prevention, but in this field, there's so much we can do to prevent as well. Let's focus also more on psychology, mental health, which I'm so happy I've seen it progressing here at ACPA, the attendance as well. But we can have that perfect aesthetic and functional result. But if that person is not satisfied in life, they're not able to get a good job, they don't feel they are welcomed, they don't feel they have friends, are not feeling well in the relationship, we didn't achieve anything at all.
Thank you. That was awesome. And I think my question leads right to that. Erica Klauber, Children's Craniofacial Association, and fantastic panel. I want to ask my esteemed colleagues, what specific strategies, responsibilities, and tactics do you recommend to reach the most vulnerable and the least resourced people, whether it's on the nonprofit side, where we're reaching out to find people who need our services most, or it's in the clinical side where maybe parents are not as eager to go on their own and do their own research? What are the responsibilities, strategies, and tactics that we can reach the most vulnerable people?
So you have to meet people where they are. That's the very first thing. And sometimes it can be a little thing. I know this might sound, especially for Eric, I know how close you are with your patients. Sometimes it could just be a handwritten note. I know that sounds so antiquated and outdated, but that's a small thing that can kind of draw people in. Another tactic can be something that I know that you do, that is like the different community events and peer groups. So I know that that's something that the CCA is doing, but just continue what you're doing. I believe throw the party, always throw the party, and they will eventually show up.
And I guess just to add to that, where it is possible to remove some of the barriers, like for example, in New Zealand, we're currently organizing a camp, and like we've got the issue of being a large geographic area, not as large as you, but large enough, where you've got a population that's quite sparsely spread out. And so acknowledging that we can't run this event in lots of places, but what we can do is subsidize people's attendance by covering their flights and things like that. I totally get that's not practical for everything, but where you have got those mechanisms, we found that to be really powerful at unlocking a group of people that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to reach.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My heart feels so big right now after this conference. And I am Diana Borges. I'm working in Mobile Surgery International in the southeast of Mexico. And I guess my question and request goes to us about your insights on how to expand this to teams and patients that are living in LMICs, where we have a lot of social barriers to be able to make this happen.
I have a few thoughts that I hope others can help out here. But I will echo what Iva said around meeting people where they are. So, you know, when we're talking about communities that are very historically underrepresented and under-resourced, they will likely need a lot of outreach. And I want to put the onus on the craniofacial medical and teen community in those spaces to do that outreach, because people in spaces where they have been chronically under-resourced are not going to know how to do that outreach themselves and have the confidence and ability to do so. It will require building a lot of trust with people with lived experience in those communities. And it will require educating people, bringing them up to speed about the current state of things and why we do things the way we do, and if that's the right message or not. You know, even in the advisory board that I used on my participatory project, people were from admittedly more privileged spaces, but we still took a lot of time to educate them about the research process, to be sure that they felt confident and knowledgeable about what they were participating in.
One of the things I'd probably just like to highlight as well, having come from the city of Toronto in Canada, more than 50% of individuals in Toronto were actually born outside of Canada. So we have a heck of a lot of diversity. And one of the things that I've kind of like realized as a person of color, intersectionality is really important because you need to think about a whole bunch of things. When you're talking about, say, for example, folks that might be underrepresented, underserved, like Indigenous populations in Northern Ontario, Canada, when you're talking about new immigrants, you need to think about things like cultural competency. So often, whether you're talking about clinical care or you're talking about research, building awareness and thinking about things like this, such as cultural competency, thinking about things such as the historical context when you're providing care or trying to involve folks in research or trying to kind of like build that kind of infrastructure. Think about that. That's really important.
Can I something just to say that I guess Diana's experience there with serving the community in an LMIC context is another example of the disproportionate allocation of resources. So much funding goes into surgical innovation when we don't even have global health equity across the facial difference community yet. So I just wanted to highlight again the disproportionate allocation of resources when it comes to safe surgery, safe access to healthcare, where in an LMIC context, the disabling nature of a disfigurement is heightened, and poverty and disfigurement are inextricably linked. And I had the joy of meeting MSI and Diana last year, where I understood firsthand the great need that exists there. And again, what a wonderful opportunity with this community that cares about those with facial differences to allocate resources to charities that are in dire need of funding across the world.
Can I just add, thank you, Diana, for that question. As you know, we've been on panels together on the same subject. I am actually in the process of trying to get funding to put together toolkits for health professionals and for people within communities who may want to start support groups and reach out. We'll see whether the funding comes through, but I've done it in tandem with Barcelona, which I know you know well, and also Ljubljana in Slovenia. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, we need resources to help guys like you know what to do in those difficult environments.
Sarah Kinter, I'm a speech pathologist and clinical researcher in Seattle. I also have lived experience. And I made a choice, I think, without realizing it 20 years ago, but made a choice to be very clear that I wore a professional hat in this organization because I was worried about being seen as somebody who just had lived experience, and that was what I had to add. And so I really set those very clear boundaries. Those same boundaries were different when I'm in patient care, but I think as an organization, we need to think about the impact. You know, I've been called the team mascot. I have had patients refer to me because I have a cleft. I have been told I'm biased because I have lived experience. I have also been told that my message is powerful to my patients. And so I'm wondering if you have advice for how to navigate, you know, these differences, because I think that this is the first time in this audience that I have felt comfortable even coming up and saying anything, because I didn't, you know, we hear these sensationalized, like tragic, amazing stories, but it's not very accessible, and it doesn't create a dialogue between people.
Thank you so much for sharing this. I wear both hats as well as a surgeon and pediatric dentist on my team too. And I've experienced, as I'm working in different teams, I'm very embraced or I'm not embraced at all. I'm a threat to people. So when actually Kenny came up with this, I was like, this is so important. And moving forward, I would love to see people, like professionals with lived experience, seeing in leadership roles like ACPA, being a board member, being part of committees, and really being embraced. Let's really change that environment too, like that we really are part, and that we don't have to wear those different hats. We can wear them both, and that we are embraced for it as well, and that we're not seeing as this, and that we can speak openly about it too, I think. But the culture really needs to change, and I think we're at the momentum that we can change the culture, and it will be little by little. But if we don't take those steps forward and really, like, actually, this is something so unique. You should be so grateful for this, to have this, and really just embrace this. And I really hope I see future steps moving forward, and that this is really the momentum of change, and that every professional with a lived experience here in the audience can actually open up about this too, and can wear both of these hats.
I just wanted to say to you, congratulations on sharing that. Thank you for feeling safe to do that here. I think going back to what you said about having to choose, in my role as the Cleft Community Development Manager, it's a project management role. That's something that I am naturally skilled at. And to be celebrated for that skill that I have, but then also to be valued for the perspective that I bring in having a cleft. It's great to not have to stand on one side, but I just wanted to say congratulations for feeling safe, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Just to echo that as well, Sarah, thank you for sharing. And I also totally know how you feel, because at home in New Zealand, it's very much like that for me at times, of being kind of in the lived experience box, and kind of the clinical contribution can be overlooked, which can be frustrating. I think ultimately it comes down to normalizing it, right? And that starts right back at the training programs, empowering people with lived experience to put themselves forward to do clinical training. And I think there's probably a bit of work to do in terms of marketing, the health professions as a good career choice where you have something to bring to the field, and that won't be perceived as a bias but a strength. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Kelly Vogelpohl. I'm a nurse from Cincinnati. I'm also a mother of twins with cleft lip and palate, so I appreciate all of the work you guys are doing. It was very meaningful on both ends, the clinical and the parental experience. The bridge, it was very meaningful as well. I have a lot of people that will say, share my experience, and sometimes I'm conflicted, like, I don't want to share too much, who is appropriate to share things with. So, and then as a nurse, when I'm working with the team who sees my kids, as I was first in this role, I kind of was hesitant. I was like, it feels kind of weird. These are my kids' providers, but then I also love this job, and I want to be passionate, and I want to share my experiences, and I want to work with patients. So it was kind of conflicting in that aspect, but then I was able to speak up and say, well, why did you do this? No one ever told me this as a parent. And then I did have a surgeon say, thank you for sharing that. We didn't think of it from that aspect, but I just appreciate everything that you're doing. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Booker. I am a college student and a fellow facial difference advocate. And I just want to say, wow, to each individual, anyone up here, Gareth, Phyllida, Kathleen, Dina, Kariym, Iva, Kenny, Jackson, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for using your power, stepping into your power. And I just wanted to say, ACPA, this is representation really matters, because 2 years ago, I didn't know this was possible. I didn't know I could become a facial difference advocate. I didn't know I can sit behind these tables and be a part of society that didn't accept me, but I just wanted to be a living example, to be like, oh yeah, I can do it. And these people, these icons that I'm excited to call my friends, my family, my community, is really, really so passionate and very, very empowering. And I can't believe I'm about to cry right now, but this is what we need. We need visible representation on social media. And we need this for the generation, the youth generation, the teens. They need this. I needed this when I was younger, and I'm 22 years old. And I'm just super, super blessed to be here, where I feel comfortable, where I'm owning my power, owning who I am. And just to be here is amazing. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. And like I said, representation really matters. And the teams are right behind us, the whole facial difference community. And we have to continue. And this is very important. Our voices are very powerful. It needs to be shared. And I just want to say thank you so much. You guys mean a lot. And let's continue to make this a better world and prove to the kids that they're worthy, they're loved, they're valued, and they are not limited, and that different is beautiful. Thank you.
Before you go, Aaliyah, before you go, you are also an icon, and we thank you for all that you're doing on social media as well, okay? And I see everything that you're doing, and you are a rock star, and we thank you for being a part of the community as well. So you're being that representation that you needed.
Hi, I'm Nicola Stock. I'm a research psychologist from the UK. Thank you for a phenomenal panel. I've spent my career so far trying to elevate the voice of people with lived experience. I don't always get it right, and I'm very happy to learn how I can do that better. But I'm certain that in your own advocacy journeys, you've come up against a lot of resistance. What would you say to those of us who are trying to be an ally or an accomplice, how we can combat consistent resistance to change?
So I hate to put Kenny on the spot about this. We had a conversation about this the other day, of that sometimes the resistance is our own self, of feeling like an imposter. And you have to remember the why. Your why will get you through a lot of things. I know, just like Aaliyah said, for me, people don't believe it. I'm an introvert. I don't really have to talk to people. I'm very shy. But I know that my why is to be representation, and that will kind of push you forward. And so when that wall does come, it's okay to stop and look at the wall and be like, but you eventually know that you're going to push it forward, because that why is bigger than that wall. So I think that would be what I would leave you with, is making sure that your why, which I know that for you it definitely is 10 times exponentially that wall. So even on those days, because we all talked about that we've lived this, it doesn't get easier. You know, living with a facial difference, you can go weeks, months, and it not affect you. And then something random out of the blue will happen, and you'll have a bad day. And you can sit in that bad day, just know that you have tomorrow to scale that wall.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add really quickly, I just thinking, just keep pushing forward and finding ways to be that advocate ally, whether it's writing, whether it's social media, whether it's being on panels like this, whether it's just using your voice to sort of get the messages out there, is a great way to be an ally to us.
And just very quickly, I'll just add to that. Sometimes when we are advocating, it takes energy for us to do it. And it is very difficult to be on all the time, 24/7, 365, advocating for ourselves. And sometimes what we need from our allies and from our accomplices, gosh, I love that word so much, it's really about being able to realize that, you know, we will have these weak points. And sometimes we do need just, you don't always need to be out there to be like, you know, speaking on behalf. Sometimes it's just being there. Sometimes it's just that support can mean a lot, whether it's in clinic or whether it's on the street and people are staring at us and sometimes we just can't deal with it. That can mean everything to us sometimes as a person with a facial difference.
Hi.
One last question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm Kariym Miller, and I'm a pediatric dentist in Virginia. And I'm originally from Brazil, so talking about overcoming challenge, I became very brave during this ACPA. I never want to ask questions, even though my brain's always asking questions. Because of my language barrier, I always feel like people will perceive me as not saying as intelligent question, or I don't know. So, but this is my passion. Phyllida, I'm gonna pick up on what you said and back on what Bieke said, challenge us. So, completely different. I admire and I love everything you guys are doing. but you are resilient, you have persistent, you have a personality that led you to where you are, okay? Grit and all this. But a lot of kids, with or without facial differences, they don't have all that, right? We are a select group of people that have that. So I want to challenge you, because kids like you, like she said, they want to see. I'm a visual learner. I was trying to learn this new device, and he was explaining, I said, can you please just show it to me? When he shows, it's like a light bulb. I want you, how can we show your faces to little kids that they can see and say, oh, I can be a doctor, I can be a Jackson, I can be a Bieke, because some of these, they just need a little push. Society needs to change. I was talking to Jackson yesterday. I really want to have a camp, because in Florida, I used to go to the craniofacial camp, and I would take my kids with me. They don't have facial differences, but my kids would go and play with the kids, and my child in 6th grade, we moved to Virginia. She had a boy in her class that had a cleft lip and palate, and it was the first thing she said, you had cleft lip and palate. And that blew his mind, because he had never talked about it. He had to go through a lot, almost a year. And one day he wrote something and went in front of the classroom and shared. I never knew this story until his mom last year shared with me that Bella really messed him up, but actually fixed him up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my child was a bully. No. He needed that challenge. So how can you do that? We want your face in the schools, in a conference for children, in places like that. In my office, I like to integrate the older kids with the babies, so they see each other, they see things happening. So that's my actually challenge to you. And thank you so much. This is amazing. This is amazing.
So I just wanted to say, I think I'm still technically a youth in some states, but I think what's so important is building a platform, or rather than having one and forcing people to advocate in a certain way. Because I know children who are artists, bakers, I know people who like to read, and I think just giving people the chance to speak in whatever form they want to be in. And I think doctors are in such a great place to do that, because you guys understand what it's like to pursue something you're passionate about. And for so many people born with cleft or craniofacial, the thing that's preventing them from doing that is their own insecurity. And so I think just encouraging people, both within their surgery journey, but also in their advocacy journey. Because I think part of advocacy is that self-advocacy. It's when you wake up in the morning and you're able to look in the mirror and say, it's going to be okay. Because a lot of days it's not okay. But if you're able to do that, and as a provider, be able to encourage that type of mindset, I think that's what needs to happen. So starting with the really small stuff, just the positive self-talk, I think that grows and grows into something big, like a panel.
I just wanted to add, thank you for sharing all that. A couple of things that came to mind is one, going into schools and speaking to kids about differences and choosing kindness and being an upstander is through the Wonder Project, which is something that I'm very passionate about. And just trying to get the kids when they're really young, because I think when they're that young, it's like, oh, like what you just shared, that, oh, okay, it's just a cleft lip and palate, or it's just, and then it's like, okay, it's no big deal, and sort of move on. And if you get the kids when they're that young, I think it's like, okay, that's just a part of who they are. And so and also, I see it all the time. I agree with you. I think even for parents, because I have all these support groups that we have, and when I hear a parent even say, just hearing your story, like when they have a 5-year-old, they can't even see that vision. Yeah. And I think all of what you said, I think, is really important to sort of keep sharing our stories and other stories, so that the younger ones can see beyond where they are at that very moment. and they maybe can't see it, but at some point, hopefully they will. So.
Okay, I wanted to give you 3 resources. Dina has a podcast with My Face. That's a great one. Aaliyah has hers with the CCA. And then also a shameless plug. Smile Train has the Love Meets Joy podcast, which I am the co-host of, and my other co-host, Ashley Barber, where we talk about our lived experiences. So for the teenagers, that may be a way to access them, because each one of us in our own group is talking about those personal things that they may not want to share with their parents or with their doctor. And maybe they can't get it from this podcast, but they relate to Aaliyah. They may relate to Dina. So those are 3 resources that I wanted to leave you with.
So can somebody add in the panel notes on our app the name of those podcasts?
I actually have another call to action. Let's create a hub where all those resources are just in this hub, where it's easy for people just to go to the hub, and it's also in every language, and it's inclusive. Like, there's so much out there, but it's so widespread. Let's just make it easy for everyone and make it easy for the children. So maybe ACPA, this is something for you, or any other organization, but really those resources are so important. They are education. It starts with education, like early on. So let's really work together.
Can I please say that the majority of them, if not all of them, will be on the Face Equality International Resource Hub, or at least on our social media channels. So that's a good place to start, and a shameless plug from me.
So Phyllida, if we can add more, please let me know how I can share with ACPA so people can find a way and really promote this. This is so important.
Drop us an email, and we're always looking to host and amplify new resources and new voices from across the community. It's multilingual. You can tag which language you're after. We are actively seeking more resources in different languages.
Thank you for sharing.
Hey, I just wanted to say real quick, I'm Dana Goodlow. I'm from Alabama. I'm a genetic counselor. Thank you for the shout out to genetic counseling, Kariym. I just want to thank y'all for your bravery of putting yourselves out there, for all of those that have come and shared what they're doing in the world of advocacy. As a parent of a child with a disability, I really appreciate what you've done. And I commend you for it. So thank you so much. In my clinical practice, one of the things I try to do is connect families that either have the same or similar diagnoses so that they can work together and learn from each other and learn from those experiences of somebody who's maybe gone a few years ahead of them. And so I appreciate what y'all are doing to get that out there on a global level. So thank you so much.
Kurt Simmons from Little Rock. I would suggest we follow the lead of the LGBTQ community, who have used the widespread media to make that condition, situation, whatever you want to call it, normal. That's not considered anything out of the ordinary now. Every single TV show you watch has representation from that group. And I have grandkids, believe it or not, I'm that old. They don't think anything about it, you know? So you really want to reach the wide public. That's where, in my opinion, we should be directing our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. And I'm so sorry, we have to stop. I'm way over time. I actually really requested more time. I'm actually really happy that I saw the program. I'm like, okay, we can go a bit over time. Please feel free to come to us, and really let's do this together. Thank you.
I'll be very quick. I also want to give thanks to Bieke. She actually organized this whole thing and advocated for us. So